Welcome along to this guide to editing a virtual performance video using the free software Shotcut. The Shotcut video editing software is completely free and works on all computer operating systems. I'm going to go through the entire process of editing the video and exporting it ready to show to the public. In my example, all of my performers have recorded their individual parts and have received that footage and saved it to my computer. I've also created a backup copy of those files. For more information on this and planning your virtual performance, do take a look at Making Music's Planning a Virtual Performance written resource, which is available on the Making Music website. We also need to remember, before we get started, not to move the location of each of those individual pieces of footage, as Shotcut will be constantly referencing those throughout the whole editing process. Additionally, if you're using an external hard drive, which is definitely possible, do remember that you're going to need to have that external hard drive plugged into your computer every time you open up Shotcut to work on your edit. So this is the screen that we see when we launch the software. And before I can show you around all of the key features in Shotcut, we need to create our project. A project is the equivalent of a document in Microsoft Word, so the editing space that we'll be using to create our performance video. Just to the right-hand side of the middle of the screen, you'll find a new project window. And within this, there's an option titled Projects Folder. Click on the folder location to the right of this, which will open up an Explorer or Finder window for you to choose the location of your project file, so where we'll save our Shotcut working file. We recommend keeping this project in the same folder as your unedited video footage. Now we can add a suitable project name for our Shotcut file. And beneath is a video mode option. This allows us to choose the dimensions and specific frame rate details for the video we'll be creating. There's lots of options, but we recommend selecting HD 1080p, which represents the dimensions of the video. In this case, 1080 pixels by 1920 pixels, which is considered to be a high quality video, but at the same time shouldn't be so high quality it will limit your editing powers of your computer. And for the frame rate, which represents how many individual photographs will be seen in each second of the video, we recommend 30 frames per second, as this matches the rate that most video cameras will film their footage at that you would have received from your performers, and also it's a kind of standard for a normal video you'll see on the internet. So finally, with HD, 1080p and 30 FPS selected, we'll click Start. You'll notice that the new project window will now have disappeared, and this means our project has been created. We now need to import our very first piece of unedited video footage. To do so, click the Open File button in the very top left-hand corner of the screen. This will open a pop-up window in which we can find our unedited footage wherever we may have it on our computer. Click Open. This will immediately open a preview of the footage, which should automatically start playing in the video preview screen on the right-hand side of the layout in Shotcut. You should be able to see the video footage playing and also hear the audio from the video. To stop this playing, I'll click the pause button, which can be found on the play controls just beneath the video preview screen. The bottom third of our computer screen is the timeline for our edit, and this is where all the video and audio files will sit whilst we're editing. We'll also be able to layer pieces of footage and audio on top of each other to create what is known as a multi-track edit. So to get our very first piece of footage into the timeline, we need to create a track for that video to sit on. To do this, At the top left of the timeline part of the screen, find the button with the 3 horizontal lines. This is the timeline menu. When we click it, it'll come up with lots of different options, and we need Add Video Track. Click this and you'll notice that it's created an empty video track in the timeline with some basic controls found on the far left. This is automatically labelled it V1 for Video 1. If we now move our mouse up to the preview video that we were previously watching, we can click anywhere on the video and drag down into the timeline. As we're doing this, we should see the word overwrite come up as our mouse hovers over the timeline. We can then let go of the click, and that piece of video footage is now within our project's timeline. You can see a box with a wave, an audio wave, representing the sound in the video, and also at the far left you should see a small thumbnail image, which should be the first image within that piece of footage. Before I do anything else, I'm going to press save as we've added a new file to the project. Video editing software can be unstable at times, even with the best computers, so do press save frequently. The save button is found at the top of the screen. With our project created and a piece of video in the timeline, we can now have a look around the software and see which of the key features we'll be needing to use. The main layout in Shotcut can loosely be split into 3 parts. The filters or export window on the top left, the preview window in the middle of the screen where we've already seen our video playing, and the timeline section, the bottom third of the screen where we will be able to see the footage mount up that we add to our edit. The filters or export section is the area where we'll be able to add filters or effects to each individual piece of footage or the audio that goes with that footage. And the preview window is the screen where you can view your footage as it's imported into the software, as we've already done with one part, and also once we have footage in the timeline, we can view our edit that we're working on. To make sure that we're viewing the edit, there are 2 tabs down the bottom of the preview window, and we need to make sure we have this on project when we wish to view our entire edit. And as already mentioned, the bottom third of the screen is the timeline, where we can have multiple tracks of video footage or audio tracks on top of each other, allowing us to make changes to each individual recording and also play them simultaneously. Shotcut and lots of leading pieces of video software allows you to move around these different window panes to meet your own preferences. We recommend keeping Shotcut set up roughly as it is now with those 3 different sections. However, occasionally you may accidentally move one of the windows around the screen by accident. In the case that this happens, if you go to the top toolbar and click on View and then Layout, there's a Restore Default Layout button which will reset the software to display the windows as it was when it was first launched. Proxy. Video editing can use a lot of computer processing power, which can make editing a frustratingly slow experience if you're using a less powerful machine. However, Shotcut, along with the majority of video editing pieces of software, has what's known as a proxy editing mode. This means that whilst we're editing our footage, rather than seeing previews of the high quality videos, we're actually seeing and making changes to a lower resolution version of our video. This allows the computer to work more efficiently to make edits and add filters. Once we've completed our edit and we're exporting our final video, the software will switch all the videos to the full resolution versions, creating your export in the highest quality that you require. We recommend keeping proxy mode on throughout the editing process. To turn on proxy editing, go to Settings in the toolbar, Proxy, and check that Use Proxy is ticked. You can also see that the proxy mode is in use, as a proxy is on label should be seen beneath the video preview screen in Shotcut. Display toolbar. This is the large toolbar running along the top of the screen. The relevant features we will be using here include Open File for importing footage or audio files or images, Save, used to save your project at any time through the editing process, and Undo. This is really useful as we'll quite frequently be making slight changes to the edit and then deciding to go back on them. The other buttons indicate which part of the software's layout you wish to see, and for the most part we can leave these untouched. Timeline toolbar. This is a specific toolbar for the timeline editing area found at the bottom third of the screen. I'll run through the features here that we'll be using. We have the timeline menu, which is the button with the 3 horizontal lines. This gives you options to add new video tracks and audio tracks to your project. Cut. This is the button to remove a track from your timeline. We also have a copy button. If we highlight a video or audio file within the timeline, we can use the copy button. And we have a paste button. This is to paste in the piece of footage or audio that we'd previously copied. And we have the toggle snapping button, which is an image representing a magnet. This turns on a feature that means that when you move a clip in the timeline, the software will assist you to move it to where it believes you'd like it to go. As we're going to be working with music and videos created by multiple performers, we're going to ensure that this is turned off, as we want to have full control over where we move our pieces of footage. Click the toggle snapping button twice to double check it's not highlighted blue, which indicates that toggle snapping is turned on. Zoom. We have zoom controls further to the right here. These allow you to zoom in or out of the timeline, which is very handy because we'll be wanting to go right into detail when moving pieces of footage either earlier or further back in time on the timeline. Additionally, we can zoom in using our computer keyboard and mouse by holding the control key on the keyboard and wheeling the mouse wheel in or out to zoom in or zoom out. Timeline ruler. This shows time in hours, minutes and seconds in your project, indicating which part of the timeline you are looking at. It starts on the very far left at 0 and at the very far right will go to the very end of your project. Playhead. This white line indicates where the footage will start playing from when we press play. It also scrolls along whilst we're playing to indicate which piece of the footage we are currently watching. If we were to click along the timeline ruler at any location, the playhead bar will be moved to that location, allowing us to choose a part of the video that we wish to watch or preview. Track controls. Each track that we create has a set of basic controls. These include a mute button to silence the audio heard within that track, which can be useful during the audio mixing process, and a hide button, which is the eye logo. This hides the video footage from within your preview screen. The hide option can be useful if you're working with lots of pieces of video footage and wish to momentarily hide a particular video track from the preview screen, making it easier to focus on changes to another part. And we'll be looking at the mute audio option once we get to the audio mixing part of the process. Timecode. Beneath the preview window is a timecode in hours, minutes and seconds and milliseconds. The left number represents where the playhead is currently within our timeline, and the right number is the total length of the project. Play controls. These controls, found beneath the preview window, allow you to play the project and also have a rewind and fast forward buttons. You can also play and pause a preview of your project by tapping the keyboard's spacebar. Audio peak meter. These bars visualize the audio being outputted by the software. There's one line for the left speaker and another for the right speaker. The bars change colour from green into yellow and then to red as they get louder. Red indicating that the audio level has reached a dangerously high level. We'll be looking at this in more detail once we get to the audio mixing stage. So with one of our 4 parts of footage already in the timeline, we are ready to import the remaining 3 parts, and to import these into the timeline as well, creating their own individual video tracks. For the second part, I'll once again click the Open File button, find the file on our computer, and once opened, this will automatically start the preview of just that single piece of footage. At this stage, that piece of video is not yet in our timeline. We've just opened it and are seeing that preview. Now I need to create a new video track. Go down to the timeline menu, the 3 horizontal bars at the top of our timeline. Click once and then find the Add Video Track button and click that. You should see this has now created a new video track labelled V2, sitting above V1 on the timeline. We can now go up to the preview screen of the footage and click and drag, bringing this down to the timeline and seeing the word overwrite appear. Be careful that this appears only over the new track that we've created, so we don't accidentally drop this on top of our first part. So let go of the mouse button once we're over the V2. I'll now repeat that process for the other 2 performers' parts. I'll fast forward now to the point that I've imported all 4 videos and they're all in the timeline on individual video tracks. So now with those videos in the timeline, we need to click and drag on all of these individual videos to line them all up to synchronize the videos and the performance. In each video block we can see in the timeline, you'll see a wave indicating the audio in the video file. The larger the spike of the wave, the louder the audio is, and when there's no wave, that indicates silence. In my case, I arranged for my performers to clap their hands 4 times at a certain time frame before they started playing the piece. This is very useful as I can see the 4 spikes in the audio waves at the very start of each recording, and now I can line up those 4 spikes. In the case that your performers haven't used a clapping technique like this, that isn't a problem. You could line it up using the very start of the performance, or perhaps by listening to the piece and using a key phrase or part of the piece that you know particularly well. So I'm dragging backwards and forwards each of my pieces to get them in line with those 4 spikes. And I'm not going to worry about the fact that I've moved some of my videos further along the timeline, potentially meaning that there's nothing at the beginning of the video, as we can sort this out further into the editing process. I can press play at any point to take a listen and hear if the videos are sounding in time. I'm also going to make use of the zoom in feature, so I'm going to use the control button on my keyboard and wheel my mouse wheel forward to zoom in. The further you zoom in to the timeline, the greater control you'll have over moving the video or audio blocks, and also you'll be able to see the audio wave in far greater detail. So after a bit of toing and froing, I should be able to get all of my 4 parts in time, and when I press play, it should sound to me as I expect the piece to sound when I hear the beginning of the performance. Do take your time with this part, because you're going to want to get it absolutely correct, otherwise your piece will always sound slightly out, as if one or two players weren't performing in time. If your group has already prepared the final audio for this video project, and you wish to line up the videos of your performers playing along with this audio, you would use the same method. You will need to import the audio performance using the standard technique, but to add it to the timeline, you'll need to create an audio track. Once synchronized, you'll need to use the mute buttons found in the track controls to silence the audio in the video tracks. This will allow you to see the videos on the preview screen whilst hearing only the pre-prepared audio track. So we now have all of our videos in time, but you'll notice that in our preview screen, we can only see the one performer, even though I can hear the audio from all four of our performers playing. This is because each individual performer's video is exactly the same dimensions as our project, so fills the entire screen. This means that the video positioned on the very top track in our timeline essentially blocks out the view of the other three performers. A good way to think about this is to consider each track to be a piece of tracing paper lying on top of each other. At the moment, all the pieces of tracing paper have images completely filling their sheets. So what we want to do is make each single track's video image smaller so we can see them through each other. To do this, click on the video footage in the timeline of the footage on the top of all your tracks in the timeline. This will highlight a red box around the video clip in the timeline to show that you've selected that video. In the panel in the top left corner of the screen, make sure you've got the filter tab clicked. If the filters are not displaying here, simply click the filters button found on the top toolbar to open the filters tab. Now we'll go to the plus logo. This will show us a menu of all the filters or effects that we can add to this video file. The filters are organised either as audio filters or video filters. We're going to click video because we're going to make a change to the video part of the footage. We're going to now scroll down through all of the filters down to size and position and double click on this. This should now show controls specifically relating to the size and position of the video that we have highlighted. Additionally, you should be able to see a white box showing around the video preview in the video preview screen on the right hand side. To change the size of this video, I'm going to click and drag on the corner of the white box to make the video appear smaller in the preview screen. And then I can click and drag on the white circle in the middle of the video to move the video footage to where I want it to appear in my screen. Alternatively, if I preferred, I could have used the controls on the left-hand side of the screen to type in the exact positioning that I would like that footage to be seen at. If you're dealing with lots of pieces of footage and you want them to be very accurately laid out, it could be useful to use a calculator to work out exactly the positions you'd like each piece of footage to be at and the dimensions that you'd like them to be seen at, and then you could simply type them in here. Now, as I've got this performer's video in the position that I want it on the screen and it's decreased in size, you'll notice that I can now see the performer's track that's layered beneath this one in the timeline's video showing through. We're going to repeat this process with the other three videos, but before we leave the first one, we're going to press the Copy Filters button, which is found beside the plus and minus buttons. Click that once, and now if we go down to our timeline, we'll highlight the second video down, and this time we're going to go up to the filters window and click the paste filters button, the fourth button along on the far right of the four options there. This will automatically place the filter that we've created for the first video part on top of this next part. You'll notice that the video has immediately got smaller, but has gone to the exact same location as the video that we resized earlier. So I'm going to go over to the video preview screen and click on the circle in the middle of the video and drag this one to where I wish it to sit within the entire video preview. We can now repeat that process with the very final 2 videos, and I'm going to fast forward through that process for the sake of this demonstration and skip to the point that we now have all 4 of the videos all decreased in size and positioned at different parts of the screen. You'll notice that there's also a black border around the videos, and that is because I've decreased the videos to such a smaller size that you can see the gaps in between the videos where there's no layer. So it's given the impression that there's a black border there, which is the style that I'm choosing to go for within this video edit. And now if I press play using the spacebar, as well as hearing all of my performers playing at once, I should now be able to see all of them performing simultaneously on the screen. Shotcut allows you to add multiple video filters to each video file on the timeline. Simply highlight the video you want to work on within the timeline and then press the plus button within the filter screen to add another filter. So perhaps it would be useful to use a crop filter to crop the image we're working with slightly. Or perhaps I'd like to use the color grading filter if I want to enhance the colors in a video or make them stand out further. Do, however, take care not to add too many filters to each video. If you're using a low-powered computer, these filters will all take up extra processing power and could cause Shotcut to run slowly or even crash on some occasions. For that reason, I've decided to go against using any further effects in this video, so we use the minus button to remove the 2 effects we've just added from this video clip. One by one, we'll now go through and add the gain/volume filter to each piece of footage in the timeline. This filter can be found in the audio filters section. Scroll down to find it and double click to add. This gives each piece of video a slider, which is effectively the equivalent of a slider on a mixing desk for the audio coming through from that performer's video. This will automatically be set at 0 decibels, and if you slide it to the right, the audio output from that video will increase, and if we slide it to the left, it will decrease. I've jumped ahead and added the gain/volume filter to each of my 4 video parts, and now I can begin the mixing process. Throughout, I'm going to be paying special attention to the audio peak meter, which can be seen just to the right of the preview video player. When mixing audio, 0 dBs is considered to be the very highest level that the software can output, and at that level, the audio will in fact distort. We're going to be aiming for the levels to be ranging between about -18 dBs and reaching to a maximum of -3 dBs at the very loudest points in the performance. It's worth remembering that the meter is showing the combined output of all the audio heard in our edit. So in our case, it's likely that the level will be far too high and we'll need to lower the level of all of the parts. Audio mixing is a creative process, so do experiment and think about which performers you wish to hear more prominently within the mix. Unfortunately, in Shotcut there is no mixing desk view, so you'll need to be highlighting the clips one by one to adjust their level in the filters window. The mute button will also come in useful if you wish to balance just 2 or 3 performers and then slowly introduce more parts as you mix. This can in fact be a great technique to stop the audio mixing process from becoming too overwhelming. As you mix and make changes, do keep your audio playing so you can hear the changes you're making, and skip through to different parts of the performance so you can hear how your changes affect the beginning, middle, and end, and maybe key sections in the performance. There is also a balance audio filter which can be added to any video file. This allows you to send the audio from each part of the performance more prominently to one speaker or the other. This can be really useful when emulating how a performance may sound if it was heard in the normal environment. Perhaps putting some performers on the left-hand side of the mix and the right-hand side of the mix to emulate how they would be sitting on a stage. But do remember to use this technique subtly, so it doesn't become too artificial in the sound quality. Now I've jumped ahead for this demonstration and have reached a point where I'm happy with my mix, but bear in mind, this is a really creative part of the process and can take a while. There are plenty of useful audio filters or effects in Shotcut that can be added to each individual performer to creatively manipulate the audio. We'd recommend looking at reverb to add some artificial reverberation to the recordings, the bass and treble filter to either boost or minimize certain frequencies in each performer's recording, and there is a compressor audio filter, which can be useful in certain cases to artificially make quieter parts of a recording sound more prominent. Do experiment with all of these, but we do advise using any of these filters or effects subtly, as it's easy to make your mix sound artificial when relying too much on these effects. And do bear in mind the audio filters in Shotcut will be applied to the entire duration of that audio track. So do check that you're happy with the way the effect impacts on the audio throughout the whole piece. Now we have the performance displaying as we require and also the audio mixed and ready for an audience, we can go ahead and trim off the unnecessary footage both at the beginning and the end of the project. To do this, one by one, click on each video file in the timeline. If you hover the mouse over the start or the end of each video block in the timeline, you'll notice the mouse changes into a double-headed arrow. If we click and drag that arrow back into the video that we're working on, you'll see it will disappear from the timeline. Use this technique to click and drag away any footage you don't wish to be seen in the final project. I'm going to use this technique to remove those claps heard and seen at the beginning of the recordings. And I can also go ahead and use the same technique to remove anything at the end of the videos. For instance, if my performer was to reach over and switch off their video recording device. I'm going to add an audio fade in and fade out to each separate performer's parts. This is a subtle technique often heard in audio production to create a more professional start and close of the piece, allowing the room tone picked up by the performer's microphones to gently fade in before the piece opens, which is considered to be more pleasing to the ear than the recording harshly starting. The same applies for the end of the piece, where we'd recommend fading out the audio tracks following the final note in the piece. Audio fade-ins and fade-outs are all separate filters and are found in the Audio Filters section. To add the filter, select the video that I want to add it to, go in the Filters part of the screen and click the plus button, and then under Audio, we'll find Fade In Audio and double click. And we'll also repeat that process but with Fade Out Audio. You'll notice that you can change the duration of the fade as well. it automatically comes set at 1 second, but you may wish to speed that up or lengthen out the time that it takes your audio to fade out. To start the video, I'd like to have a white screen with some text indicating the name of the performance before we see our performers. To do this, I've used a simple image editing piece of software like Microsoft Paint or perhaps Photoshop or even an online tool such as Canva, and I've created a simple rectangle image in that software using the same dimensions as my video project. So in this case, 1080 pixels by 1920 pixels. And if I wanted to double check the dimensions of my project before creating this box, I could do so in Shotcut by clicking on Settings found on the top toolbar and Video Mode. Then I should see a white dot beside the setting my project is set up as. So in this case, HD 1080p, which means my project has the dimensions of 1080 pixels by 1920 pixels. So for my video, I've created a simple white box in those dimensions and I've saved this into my computer's folder as a JPEG. Now I'm going to import this using the exact same process I did when importing my video files. So I go to Open File, find my image and click Open. Then you'll see the image displaying in the video preview screen. Obviously it's not a video, so it will just display the white box. And I'm going to add a new video track to the timeline, as even though this is an image, it needs a video track because it's something visual. And now I can click and drag from the preview screen my white box down into my new video track, seeing the word overwrite appear and then letting go of it. So now with that white box in there, I'm going to use the same technique as I used to shorten my performers videos to get rid of the unnecessary footage. I'm going to use that technique to lengthen this image of the white box, increasing the amount of time it will be seen on the screen. So I'll go to the end of the block indicating the white box, wait for the double-headed arrow to appear, and then I'm going to click and drag to the right and get that on the screen for about 5 seconds, I think. And I'm also going to pick this up and I'm going to drag it so it overlaps the beginning of my performance. So I've decided to do mine in such a way that my videos started and I could see my performers there for a split second before they started playing their piece. But I'm just going to cover up some of that with this white box. And now with that all in place, I can highlight everything by doing Control A or going to the timeline menu and scrolling down to select all. And then I'm going to click and drag on any of the pieces of video in the timeline and drag them right back, right to the very beginning of the timeline. So everything starts at 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So when I press play, I should see my white box, and then after 5 seconds, I'll see my performers appear. So with that in the correct position, I now want to add my text. And to do this, I click on the white box in the timeline, go up to my filters, and I'm going to add a new filter. Under video, I'm going to scroll down to text simple, double click on that, and then it's going to bring up all the filter options for some text. You'll see there's a text box in the filter section, so I can type and write in exactly what I want it to say there. And just beneath is a place where I can select the color of my font. So I'm going to change that so it's something that stands out nicely over my white background. And to the right, there's an option here to change the font. So I'm going to go with something different that suits my video or perhaps my group. Maybe I've got a visual brand for my group. I'll also, just like when we resized the videos earlier on, I can resize the text straight away without needing to use any other filters. I just go over to the preview box and click and drag on the white box to change where the text will appear on the screen. And I can change the position of where the text is seen and also the font size using this technique. Now, happy with where it is, I'm almost ready to go, but I just want to create a fade technique so we blend in from this opening title into my video with a bit of a fade. So I'm going to add one more filter. In the video filters, I'm going to go and find the fade out video filter, double click on that. And most importantly, I'm going to tick the box here that says adjust opacity. So it fades into the footage. If this wasn't ticked, it would fade to black rather than fade in such a way that I can see my performers underneath. And now I'll press play and I should be able to see my video appear how I want it to from the very beginning. So my text on the white background, and then we fade into the performers who then start playing the piece. This may appear a bit glitchy. Don't be put off by that. That's just because by adding all these filters, we've put a bit more pressure on the computer and it's having trouble displaying it for this preview, but it will be fine when we do our final export because it will have plenty of time to render all the video in its highest quality. And I'm not going to do it for this one, but I could repeat this exact same technique for the very end of the video should I want to have some credits at the end. With the video edit now complete, we're ready to export the final virtual performance. In Shotcut, along the top toolbar, you'll find an export button above the preview screen. Click this, and on the left are a selection of presets for exporting your video. In most cases, we'd recommend selecting the H.264 high profile preset. Additionally, you can click Advanced just to the right, and this will show all the technical settings regarding your export, and you can make changes. Make sure that From Timeline is selected at the top, and when you're happy to go, click the Export File button. This will open a pop-up asking you to select the location where you'd like to save your final export. Type in your chosen file name, and the export process will begin. If you look over on the far right hand side of the screen, there should be a jobs display, which also can be reached if you click on jobs found along the top of the screen. This should show the progress of the exporting process. This whole process can take a while, so do make sure you have time and ideally don't use your computer for any other tasks whilst exporting. Once finished, the file name for the export will now turn blue in your Jobs section of the screen, and you now should be able to find the final file on your computer. And this is ready for you to publish online or send to the other members of your group. Your project will also remain available on your computer should you wish to make any further changes to the edit in the future.